I still think of that weekend as if it's nearby in time, though it lives a long way back. Late October carried that clean, metallic smell, the kind that says the year is closing its hand. Work had been stacked high for weeks. Voices, fluorescent light, the feeling I hadn't finished a thought in months. I wanted a small spell of quiet before the cold pushed everything indoors. No grand plan, just a lake I used to visit, an old tent, and the comfort of doing something simple, the way I used to do it. I packed without fuss. Stove, beans, a paperback with a cracked spine, that faded sleeping bag that always smells faintly of cedar. It felt good to know where each thing belonged. I told myself I'd only be gone a couple of days. Back before anyone noticed I'd stepped out of rhythm. What I wanted most wasn't scenery. It was that stillness where a person can hear their own thoughts arrive and settle. Nothing dramatic. A quiet weekend where nothing happened. That's what I told myself as I shut the trunk, while the leaves skittered by like they were in a hurry to be done. The road there is mostly empty past the last town. 2 lanes bending through low hills and tired fields. The sun hung a little lower than I'd planned, but I wasn't worried. I recognized everything, and yet not quite. An old gas station painted a new color, a sign missing a letter, a fence line sagging where it used to stand sharp. The lake came into view as the light thinned. It always looks larger when the air is cold, like it pulls the distance closer. I parked beneath a stand of birches and took my time, because that's why I'd come. The tent went up the way it always does, when your hands remember for you. A small fire. Nothing to attract attention, just enough for warmth and a place to stare into. Beans in the pan, nets in the water, with the easy faith they'd have a gift for me by morning. I read until the print softened and drifted. The fire sank into a pulse. There was a stillness I thought I wanted, deep and complete, as if the night had pressed its ear to me, listening for proof I was there. After the fire sank to a reddish blink, the world took on that flat quiet you don't get in town. No engines, no doors, just small living things. Water turning itself over, a leaf finding ground, the tent fabric sighing as the air cooled. I lay on my back and let the quiet fill every crowded place inside me. It felt almost medicinal. I could smell the lake, dark and iron-tinted, and the faint, sour trace of smoke caught in my clothes. My body ached in that honest way that comes from a day you decided for yourself. I told myself this was the point, to be a man, in a place that doesn't need anything from you. The cold crept in like a thoughtful hand, and I tucked the bag tighter around my shoulders. I remember the page I'd been on, the shape of the paragraph more than the words. I must have drifted somewhere between one breath and the next, because I don't remember choosing to sleep. Only that the tent's white ceiling had settled into a soft grey that felt kind, and the sounds of the lake had moved farther away. I woke, without a reason I can name. Not a bang, not a cry. The night had changed texture. The fire was a low, dark mound, and my eyes did that slow adjustment, when you don't want to admit you're awake yet. That's when I heard it. Movement, just beyond the tree line. Not rushing through, not animal quick. A measured back and forth, the way you walk when you're thinking more than traveling. Pacing. It had that deliberate rhythm that makes you lean toward it. My first thought was ordinary. Maybe someone had come in late to use the water's edge, or a ranger making rounds. My voice surprised me. It came out, and I couldn't pull it back. I called a simple hello, the kind meant to keep things normal. The steps stopped right away. The night became exact. Every small sound seemed to excuse itself and step aside. I sat there, lips clamped around a breath I hadn't finished taking. Nothing answered. I told myself it could be a deer freezing after hearing me. I told myself a lot of things, the useful kind that let a person lie back down. I didn't move, and the quiet pressed a little harder. It's strange how fear settles. First sharp, then dull, then patient. I lay listening to the kind of silence that has weight. The cold came up through the ground, and I pulled my knees in like that would stop it. Every small sound from the trees felt intentional, as if each creak had purpose, as if the night itself were trying not to disturb something else that might be listening too. I thought about the distance to help and realized I couldn't measure it in minutes. That thought sits in your chest differently. I kept my hand near the zipper, not touching it, because the sound it would make felt like a choice I couldn't take back. I told myself again, it was an animal, that the woods are full of harmless movement, that only feels personal in the dark. The rational part of me kept whispering, and I let it, because I needed its voice. Eventually, my breathing slowed, and the shape of the tent returned to being just fabric and poles. The world didn't move, or if it did, I couldn't hear it. That quiet began to feel less like a threat and more like something waiting its turn. Light came a little late, or maybe it only felt that way, because I'd been measuring nothing by itself for so long. The first color that returned to the world was that faint smoke brown after embers, and then the lake put a pale stripe through the trees. I unzipped the tent, the way you do when you're trying not to disturb a thought. The air outside tasted like metal and wet leaves. Coffee first, routine first, because normal steps are handrails. I turned to stir the ashes, and that's when I saw them. Impressions where there shouldn't have been any. Bare feet, not tiny, not grown. That in-between size you don't quite know how to name until you say teenager. And even then, you're only guessing. The prints were neat, each one placed as if the ground had been considered before it was used. They skirted the fire's edge and made a loose ring around the tent, close enough that whoever made them could have reached out and pressed a hand against the fabric where my shoulder had been. I stood very still. I looked for the line that would carry them away, but they didn't choose a direction. They were only here. And then they were not. I've tried explaining to myself how prints can exist without a path, and I never arrive anywhere good. I walked the perimeter like a slow clock, reading the ground. The little messages leaves and soil leave each other. Nothing else marked the earth. No heel picked up grit and set it down again. No toe pushed off into the next step. I crouched and touched one of the impressions with 2 fingers. The dirt was cool, faintly damp, holding the shape like a memory it hadn't decided to release yet. I thought of possibilities and rejected them one by one, not because they were impossible, but because they didn't fit that carefulness. A prank would have left laughter somewhere. A lost kid would have called out or headed for water or light. A ranger would have worn boots. I thought about the sound from the dark, that even pacing, the way it paused exactly when I spoke, and noticed my hands had gone quiet and steady, the way they do when your mind knows something it won't say out loud. I kept searching, but the ground kept offering me only my own boot prints and that thin ring of bare feet. The lake looked ordinary. The trees didn't care. I packed with a strange politeness. folding the tent as if not to wake something. Didn't check the nets. The water sounded the way it always does when it brushes the shore, like a voice you can almost understand. The drive back felt longer, even though the road hadn't changed. I remember passing the same fence line, seeing the same sag, and paying attention like it mattered. Town returned with its ordinary noises and little errands. People talked about weather and recipes and a game I hadn't watched. I nodded in the right places, and no one could tell that part of me was still by a low fire, looking at the ground. With time, the sharpness of that morning wore down, the way a cut becomes a line you can't quite find unless you're looking. But at night, there's always that seam of wakefulness, where my ears go back to that patient quiet, and I wait for a sound I hope not to hear, and yet listen for anyway. I ask myself whether it matters that I never knew who was out there, or what they wanted. I tell myself it doesn't, and then the room goes still, and I still wonder.